While I'm a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer. That's what I always tell people, right? Unless we have a one-to-one conversation or we do more than, yes, this is general information that does work for most people. But of course, specific questions should receive specific answers. But yeah, so when we're looking at starting a business, that can look like a lot of different things. A lot of people just start a business, right? And they don't even think about the entity or how I do that, right? They just think, I want to do this. I have a client. Here we go. And when you do that, you're called a sole proprietor. So that's like the default. It's not technically a business entity. It's just you're doing business as an extension of you personally, right? There's no separation between you and your business, which can be risky, can be fine, right? The pros and cons of that are really that it's the pros, right? It's much cheaper. You just start doing business. Here you go. By default, you're a sole proprietor. The downside potentially, right, is that there isn't that separation between you personally and your business. So if there was some sort of catastrophic lawsuit, you were liable for something, certainly we hope your insurance kicks in if you have insurance for your coaching business. But there is the possibility, right, if everything goes wrong, that your personal assets could be part of some sort of judgment against you, right? So that is the thing to be aware of with sole proprietorships. I think sometimes they get a bad rap because people think, oh, well, I can't possibly do this without a business entity. But oftentimes the sole proprietorship is fine, especially in the beginning, right? We get our feet wet with what we're doing. We sort out the basics of how we're going to run the business. And then we shift into an LLC model or a corporation model. As far as the entities, yes, the most common is the LLC, right? Limited liability company is what that stands for. It's the most general, it's the most basic. You file in your state, and then assuming you have done everything correctly and you file all the right maintenance documents, you have that separate business entity. Now, with that, you have to walk the walk as well as talk the talk, right? That discussion prevents so many of the problems later, right? Doing the work up front, laying that good foundation, making sure the client understands what we're doing, what we're not doing, answering their questions, being clear up front will, I want to say like 99%, but you never know. But so frequently doing that work up front prevents the later issues because the client understands, right? So they're not expecting you to diagnose and treat. They get it, right? They're saying, "Oh, yep, I remember you told me I need to check with my doctor. Yep, I remember you told me this was just education." So they don't cross the line as much because they have been educated on what this is and what this isn't. So that's the hugely important piece of that contract up front and how you as a business owner can use it as a tool to prevent those lawsuits. So then later, if you breach the contract, if you are diagnosing, you are treating, you are going outside the contract, then yes, it could affect the overall reliability of that contract because now you have breached. Just like if your client stops paying you, your client goes rogue, they have breached, right? So within the bounds of that contract, both parties have said this is what we're going to do and this is what we're not going to do. So if you go outside of that, then we have a problem. Doesn't necessarily mean the contract becomes invalid or not important. It just means it would give the client reason to say, this is what you said you were going to do, and you went outside of that.
Mhm.
So now we have a liability issue, right? Because these limitations of liabilities only work when you do what you say you're going to do, just like the
Yeah.
client. So it makes everybody follow the rules. And when you don't, then yes, it does present a problem. It doesn't mean it's unenforceable or not important or not worth everything, but it just means that you also need to read your contract and understand this is the limitations of what I can and can't do and resist the temptation, right? Especially if you have additional knowledge or you are capable of doing the diagnosing and the treating, resisting the temptation to do that, right? And saying, I'm just providing education. This supplement or this protocol may work. Check what you know the drill. But sticking with what you know to do, sticking within the scope of what you know to do. Of
By the way, guys, we're over 30 minutes in, so if you have any questions for Christy, please feel free to drop them. If I can I steal an extra 10 minutes of your time, because I feel like I want to keep this for an hour. Thanks.
course.
Because I already have another. So yeah, if you guys have questions, drop them. We'll prioritize them. But the thing that I wanted to follow up with is, should FDNs and health coaches, for that matter, should we all be recording our sessions then? Because I'm thinking about the old saying, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound if no one's around to actually hear it? And I'm thinking, okay, so let's say I do have this terms of service agreement. Everything that I do on my consults is by the book. But if there's no recording and the client says, I didn't I did something else other than what I actually did. And now I'm saying, no, no, I promise I did this. How can I prove it? So should we be recording our sessions?
Yeah, I think if the sessions are verbal, right? If it's a one-on-one call or a Zoom or whatever, I think that's a good idea. It keeps everybody honest, right? But it keeps everybody on the same track. And if there was, I'm trying to think of an example of when that would be an issue, right? If someone said you told me this and you didn't, common misunderstanding, right? Sounds like
Mhm.
that there was some sort of disconnect in the communication about what they were supposed to do, or they went off the rails and something happened and now they're trying to hold you responsible for something that you just didn't flat out didn't do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Recording calls can be helpful. Emailing, sometimes if I am on a phone call, this is just like the way I do things as a lawyer, right? If I'm on a phone call, I love sending like the confirmation email after, like summarizing here's what we said, here's what we're doing, here's what
Okay.
everybody is. Lawyers tend to like everything in writing, right? So when there's a period of time where something's not in writing, we do memorialize it in writing of this is who's doing what, this is what we agreed on. And then the other party says confirmed, yes. So that a paper trail at a minimum of your calls is a good idea. So yes, recording is great. Email summary of what was talked about is great. If you have another way in which you and your client communicate, memorializing all of what was talked about in a call, I think is great. And that gives you the opportunity to redirect and use all of the right words after a call. You could say, just to confirm, I educated you on this. And we talked about the possibility of this supplement helping with XYZ. We confirmed that you're going to talk to your doctor to see if this is the right protocol. You can really lead that summary. And that helps the person too. Because oftentimes, I don't know, this is probably different for every person, but sometimes your client's taking the call like in the car, or sometimes they're taking the call. So they're not going to remember every single thing you said. They're going to remember probably this was my result. This was the name of the supplement. Here's where I can buy it. And then they're going to go on with their day. And so having that written set of instructions after, or yeah, if there's a note taker for Zoom, I don't know all the tech stuff. But yeah, if that like already is a thing, certainly with AI, I imagine it is, right? Like you can summarize the call. Although, like, huge disclaimer, the AI is not a person.
That's about that.
Don't
Still,
use it to
it's
write
getting
your
better, but I'd still
contracts.
be a little careful.
For the love, don't use it to write your contracts. But yes, please still use your human brain to use the right terminology in an email summary, right? Because this stuff is important, right? We want to make sure we're reminding them, I educated you on this. We talked about the possibility of this supplement helping. Please confirm with your doctor before. You can even reiterate all of those disclaimers and all the right things in some kind of an email summary to your client after the call, so that when they're reading it, it gives them an opportunity to say, oh yes, check with my doctor. This is the name of the supplement. It reminds them to follow the path. Because
Mhm.
oftentimes, like, we have to educate our client just as much on what the limitations of our practice is,
For
right? We
sure,
have
for
to
sure.
educate them on the scope. They don't know. They're coming into it being like, cool, he's going to treat everything. And you have to be the one to keep us in the lane, right? So
Yeah.
that's your responsibility as a coach, you meaning everybody, right? Not just you, Evan, but to keep everybody in the lane. Your client's job will probably be to go outside the lane, right? Because
Mhm.
they're going to want treatment. They're going to want this. And you have to be the one that says, no, this is what we're doing.
Yep.
So any way that you can get those added reminders in there with the summaries, the right words, reminding them to check with their doctor, right? All of that is going to be a positive thing. And you can work that into your sort of protocol of how you work with clients.
That's awesome. I almost would say at this point, just hearing what you just said, I think the post follow up, like with the email summary or the notes, is even better than the recording. Not that I guess both can be useful in a certain setting, but that almost seems even better because then it's this is what we agreed upon. Here you
Build
go.
as you. Yeah.
Yes. And some clients don't want their stuff recorded. So that's why I'm thinking it in my head. I totally respect that. There's a privacy thing for sure. But
Mhm.
sending that over afterwards, that is objective. This is what I sent you. You can't fake it. Even if they edited it, I still have my original email in the original form of the document if it's digital. So that's really smart. And this is so needlessly paranoid. I've never heard about this with FDNs, but I spend way too much time studying random stuff. And I
I love
somehow
it.
developed 10 years ago this love for certain branches of like abnormal psych and evolutionary psychology. And I walk around every day. It's a stupid thing to walk around with, knowing that like 1 to 3% of males are psychopaths and a subset, very small subset of women are psychopaths. And I'm like, these people don't care. They don't have empathy and they will lie, right? So they would decide
Totally.
to turn to service. These are the people that fall on the curb on purpose at your local gas station and then are all sue happy, even though you can watch the video and see that they did it on purpose. So I just always think about that in the back of my head, and I need to be prepared for the 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 100 that might just be that bad apple